Okay, one last thing to cover before we leave the Setup I/O dialog box is to discuss the default output bus. Default output bus can be found under the Bus tab, and you'll see it down here, Default Output Bus. So what is this? Whenever you create a new track, Pro Tools will use the default output bus that you've selected right here, and whatever you have selected here will be the outputs of that new track. So for example, for a mono track, I could choose a specific output, maybe output 5. And then when I create a new mono track, like I do right now, you'll see that the default output is selected as output number 5, which is what I have in my default output bus. So you can select a variety of outputs or buses for both mono and stereo or any other type of track that you have in your session. So for example, our stereos, we could have default to maybe 3 and 4, and our monos we could have maybe default to 5 like I did before. So now when I add a new stereo track and a new mono track, you can see that the outputs will be different. 5 for the mono and 3 and 4 for the stereo. So that's the default output bus and its functionality. To open a new session, you have to make sure you can access the dashboard. You do that by going Command and N, and you'll see it gives you the Create, Recent, and Projects tabs. Recent, it will show you the 10 most recent sessions you've had open, and Projects will show you projects that you have either been assigned or that you've created yourself. Because I haven't logged in, it's not going to show me any sessions at all. So the first thing you'll need to do is to log in order to see the projects that you have. It's also important to make sure that you log out if you're working like on a school machine or something like that, so that no one else has access to your projects. So once I log in, you can see I have 4 different projects that have been assigned to me or that I have created. Once you've opened a session or a project, you may want to add additional tracks. You remember from Pro Tools 101, we can add additional tracks by going Shift Command and N or coming up to the track menu and choosing New. There's also a variety of shortcuts that we learned here. In addition to this, though, there are some double-click shortcuts that you can take advantage of that can really speed up your ability to add new tracks to your session. You can do this in either the Mix window or the Edit window or an open space in the tracks list. The shortcuts are for a master track, hold Shift down and double-click. See, that's added a new master track. Let me go ahead and delete this. And I'll do the same thing in the Edit window by again holding down Shift and double-clicking. And you can also accomplish the exact same thing in the Mix window. So again, Shift and double-clicking in a blank space in the Mix window adds a new master track to your session. Control and double-clicking in the same 3 locations will add a auxiliary input track. Option will add an instrument track, and Command will add a audio track. There is no shortcut to add a MIDI track, unfortunately, at this time. So those are the 4 options you have for double-clicking and adding a new track to your session or project. The channel widths of the tracks that you add will be based on the last track that you created in your session. So I can tell that the last track I created was a stereo track because this new track is stereo. So if I wanted to create a mono track, I would have to add a mono track like this. And now every other track that I added, I'll hold down Command and double-click, will be a mono track because that was the last track that was added. Now this shortcut only works for the specific track type. So if we go back and try to add an auxiliary input track, you'll see that it was stereo. So again, if we wanted a mono aux input track, we would have to first add a mono aux input track the old-fashioned way, and now every other track that we added that was an aux input track would duplicate that same channel width. It's also possible to add multiple tracks at one time by holding down multiple modifiers at the same time. So I could go Shift, Control, Option, Command and add all 4 of the track types all at once. So audio, instrument, aux, and in this case master. Again, you can see by default that the instrument track is stereo. The others are mono because those are the last channel widths that I added. Okay, next let's look at configuring our track routing. Let's say, for example, that we're setting up a send-return configuration. We're going to use this aux track to accomplish that goal. So I'm going to rename it verb, and then just for clarity's sake, I'll go ahead and delete these files, or these tracks right here. Now I'm going to send this to a specific bus. So we'll say bus 5 and 6. Now, we could rename this bus either in the input-output dialog box under Setup, or we could right-click on it and say Rename. So maybe we want to call this, instead of bus 5 and 6, we want to call this Verb. It's easier for us to remember. That way, when we send something to the verb, like this, we can see it's actually got that name, Verb, assigned to it. So we can change that by right-clicking on the Send and choosing Rename. We could also, as you remember, do the exact same thing from the Setup, IO Setup dialog box. And if you come down here, you'll see there that particular bus has been renamed Verb.